there are a lot of myths in customer marketing that a lot of us may not even have ever questioned why we do some of the things we do. We just sort of take it for granted that this is the way customer marketing is done. So let me just describe a little bit about what we're going to do. First of all, my name is Jeff Ernst. I'm co-founder and CEO of Slap5, and also one of the organizers of the Customer X community. And so today, again, we're going to be debunking some of these mega myths. And I just have to warn you up front that some of you may not like what you hear, because I may be questioning some of the fundamental things that are core to what you do. But all I ask is that you don't shoot the messenger, because what I'm going to share today is not my opinion. What I'm going to be sharing today is what I have learned and what research has shown me over the last 10 or 12 years of doing almost 2,000 buyer and customer interviews. Now, I've done this at Forrester. I was a principal analyst at Forrester for 3.5 years, developed their buyer persona research methodology, and conducted many hundreds of customer and buyer interviews there. I've also done this as part of affiliated with the Buyer Persona Institute, using a different buyer persona methodology. And then also as Slap5, I've done a ton of research with our clients, helping understand both what their buyers want as it relates to customer proof, as well as helping them understand what their customers want from their program in order from your customer program to really make it a two-way exchange of value. So I hope people will be open-minded, listen to what we have to share, and just recognize this is based on data. This is not based on anybody's opinion. And I just want to mention that the Accelerate series is a lead up into the Customer XCon conference in October in Boston, which has the theme called Accelerate. And so you'll start to hear a lot of that theme. If you want to learn more about the conference, go to customerxcon.com. But we're very excited about how this conference is shaping up. So let me jump right in. I'm going to start with the 10 mega myths of customer marketing. And I'm going to introduce each myth in the context of what it is that somebody in your company is saying to you that's causing you to respond and propagate this myth. And so first one, I figured I might as well take the big one head on, because I know I used to be the biggest advocate of writing case studies in that traditional challenge, solution, result format with a third-party writer. And I think probably just about everybody on this call does this today. But let me just talk about why we're doing this. It's because sales is always coming to us saying something like this: I've got a prospect in the banking industry, so I need a banking case study that I can send to them that prove that we do work in the banking industry. And so what do sales reps do? They take these case studies that we scramble around to give to them, and then they send them to customers without reading them, without having any idea if what's been talked about in that case study is even relevant to the buyer. Does this buyer, yeah, they're the same industry, but are they having the same pains, same challenges? And so, and I can tell you that not once in the 2,000 plus interviews that I have done, not once has a buyer where we actually dig deeply in and ask them at each point of their decision-making process, what are the resources that they thought that were sent to them by the vendor, that they consumed themselves, that they found on their own, and where did they get those resources? And not once has one of those customers said that they were actually influenced by a written case study in this challenge, solution, result format. And what's wrong with them? Well, first of all, they don't align with how buyers like to consume information. First of all, they are written. I mean, you know the storyline of these case studies, right? And I'm saying this because I've written hundreds of them in my career. But the storyline always goes like this: the customer was in a world of hurt. We were their knight in shining armor, and now they're living happily ever after. And for proof of that, let's see this little happy quote at the bottom. And so there's lots of challenges with that. One is that it's written in the third person by a writer. Your prospects want to hear from the first person customer's voice. They want to hear their tone of voice. They want to hear the emotion in the voice. What they don't want to hear or read is what a professional writer crafted up by doing an interview and then regurgitating what that customer said in their own words. Because what happens is these case studies always they lose their real customer voice. They just become full of marketing speak. And so that's a real challenge there. So buyers actually, like I said, they want to hear the first person customer voice, the raw emotion, and they just don't want to read these as static PDFs. Yet it's one of the staples, I think, of every single marketing department is that they're addicted to producing these things. And so what I say, if you don't believe me, do your own buyer research. Ask whether your buyers are actually consuming all these case studies that your team throws at them, or look at your web analytics, which can also be deceiving too if you put these on your website, because sometimes people do skim through just to see who your customers are, but all my research shows that they don't actually read them. All right, so let me continue on. I'm going to go to the mega myth number 2, and this typically comes out of the mouths of your senior executives. They tend to believe that any kind of customer content, any kind of customer story is worthless or empty if it doesn't have hard ROI. And I'm going to, feel free if people have heard this from their executives, everything has to have hard ROI. Feel free to put in the chat that you, that you've heard this before. And so so what does this really mean? Well, buyers, they take any type of ROI claims from your other customers with a grain of salt. First of all, buyers are smart. Just like car buyers, right? We know that just because that sticker says that this car is going to get 39 miles to the gallon on the highway and 28 in the city, that doesn't mean that's the mileage we're going to get, right? Because everybody is different. Everybody drives differently. Same thing with your solutions. Everybody's going to implement them differently, apply them to different use cases. So if you think just because company X got a 287% ROI in 3 years, it doesn't mean that every buyer is going to get that exact same ROI. What buyers really care about is how you got to the results that you achieved. What steps did you take along the way to get there? Because what they're really trying to decide for themselves is how likely is it that my company can achieve and actually execute effectively the steps that the company whose ROI you're claiming was gotten. And so I would push back on your executives about hard ROI and say, hey, have you ever heard that from a prospect, that they want hard ROI? Because the real thing that they want is, don't put any numbers out there about ROI unless you've got the actual narrative in the customer's first person voice about what it was that they did to achieve that ROI, the organizational change, the change management issues, the political stuff, everything that was entailed in doing that, because it's a big deal. Okay, I'm just going to see if anybody's saying so many times. Actually, Julie, yeah, you've been getting this. You've heard this claim before, obviously. So let me just continue. Just so you know, I'm going to have plenty of time for people at the end to disagree with me if you'd like. Again, I'm basing this on data, but you may disagree, or you may have your own data, maybe in your own niche or your own market, which is different than the norm. That's okay. And so let me get into the third mega myth of customer marketing. And this one generally comes from all the folks around marketing. And I can't tell you how many times this has happened in my career that somebody says, hey, we just got this great happy quote. Let's plaster it everywhere. Let's put it on our website. Let's put it in our PowerPoint decks for our sales reps. Let's put it in our email blasts. Let's put it in our lead nurturing campaigns. Let's put it everywhere. And so it's so interesting, though, because the quotes tend to be very trite. They tend to be platitudes, right? They tend to be like this one here. I would definitely recommend HubSpot. It's an excellent tool. I'm glad we chose them. And HubSpot does this. They plaster these quotes everywhere. They're addicted to their happy quotes. But the real truth is that happy quotes do not help a buyer, right? Because they're empty, right? It's just, yeah, maybe you got a logo there and you got a smiling face of somebody in this text quote, and it might make you feel good, but it doesn't necessarily give the buyer the confidence they need or any specific information that helps them overcome the questions, fears, and doubts that they have at any moment in time as they're going through their decision-making process or their problem-solving process, even before they get into a buying process. And so where are happy quotes great? What I suggest is, yeah, still make a big deal when you get them, but make a big deal of them internally. Have your CEO read them off at company meetings. That's a great thing to do. You get all your employees jazzed because this is what your customers are saying. Or better yet, let's say you do have even what we call kind of the accidental or incidental type of customer feedback that just comes in unsolicited. I mean, when you do get a happy quote like that, this is a perfect opportunity to reach out to this customer and say, hey, thank you for sharing that sentiment. You really intrigued us. We'd love to have a deeper conversation with you, to ask you a few more questions to really understand what it is we've done to help you get to this point where you feel this way. Okay, so they do serve their purpose, but they just don't move buyers and overcome their questions, fears, and doubts. Okay, let me just continue on here. I'm going to go to myth number 4. And this one oftentimes comes from the products teams, right? The products teams will frequently say, hey, we need 5-star reviews. Our competitor has 300 5-star reviews. We need 500 5-star reviews. It's all about getting the 5-star reviews. And we're going to pay people. We're going to give them $200. We're going to give them discounts, whatever it takes. We just need people to go out there and write 5-star reviews. Well, let's take a look at what it is and how it is that buyers use peer review sites. First of all, in order to really understand this, think about how you use peer reviews on Amazon as a consumer. And I know I do this, and I'll describe how I do it, because this is exactly what my research shows is what B2B buyers do with the B2B peer review sites. Is one, they're going to be suspect of 5-star reviews. They're going to assume that a 5-star review, especially if there's a whole bunch of them with no counterbalance, that you paid for them or they're not genuine. And so if you're totally weighted to 5-star reviews, you're going to lose trust because they're all going to be discounted. And the reality is none of us are perfect, and none of our companies are perfect at delivering our customers. So there should be a mix of reviews, right? Not everything should be 5-star. But here's the real important thing to take away is that what buyers really do, the real value that they get out of peer review sites is they go in and scour the 1- and 2-star reviews, because what they're looking for is a red flag. They're looking for something that really stood out that caused a company just to have an awful experience that will keep them from making the same mistake. So they put a huge emphasis on the 1- to 2-star reviews. And so what I often tell people, and they're like, well, what are you talking about, Jeff? Is, when it comes to your peer reviews, yeah, you're going to get your fair share of 5-star as you're asking for them. But what you really need to manage are your 1s and 2s. I mean, if it's a site with identified customers, reach out to them or have your CSMs reach out to them, find out why it was that they gave you that rating, and find out what it is that your company can do to turn the sentiment around. What did they do? And so the great news, though, is that I know from experience and research that when customers who have written a 1 or 2-star review are reached out to by the company and the company addresses their concerns, they are actually even more happy than if they had been like a 4 or 5-star review type person from the very beginning, because they really appreciate that you've come to the rescue and that you've helped them. And so you turn a bad story into a great story, and oftentimes these customers will go in and revise their reviews. And so really it's important to manage the 1s and 2s, because the 1s and 2s will do you way more harm than the 5s will do you good. So so that's something to keep into account. And then also as it relates to these reviews, what buyers hate are the one-word answers to questions. Like, what's the best thing about this platform? And they write integrations. And then the next question is, what's the worst? What could use the most improvement? And they write security. I mean, those one-word answers are just useless to a buyer. And so if you're going to be really proactively trying to push your customers to write reviews, really try to encourage them to, if any question, if they're going to answer a question, give at least a sentence or two, or give at least some context to make it useful, because just one-word answers are so common and they're so useless to a buyer and so disappointing when they get in there. I mean, think about it. What are buyers really trying to do? They're trying to reduce their risk. They're trying to really make a perhaps career-influencing decision on a major purchase, and so help them get that confidence. Okay, so let me keep going. Yes, I see Gordana says they look for patterns of complaints in the bad reviews. Absolutely right. They're gonna, because that's an indication of a red flag. If I see 3 people complained about this one thing, there's a good chance that I might encounter that too. And in doing that, I like to say that buyers are looking for a crystal ball into what it's like to be a customer before they make that purchase. And it's only your customers that can give them that crystal ball. Your company can't, with any kind of credibility or accuracy, tell them what life as a customer is like. Okay, so that was myth number 4. Let me continue on now. Marketing mega myth number 5. And I got this one all the time. Even when I was at Forrester, I created at Forrester the Forrester Frontlines program, their first ever customer engagement and advocacy program that just totally transformed how we did marketing. And but my colleagues in the other parts of marketing would always like whenever I was trying to capture customer stories, I would have a great one. They would say, well, that's not a household name. We can't use them. They're not a household name. It has to be Coca-Cola. It has to be McDonald's. It has to be IBM. It has to be AT&T. It has to be Starbucks. That's the only thing our buyers care about. They don't want to read a customer story about somebody they've never heard of. It has to be like the top 10, top 25 brand names if we're going to invest in writing or creating a story about this customer. But that's total hogwash, right? Because one of the biggest complaints that I've gotten across these 2,000 buyer interviews is that when it comes to sending the case studies, when it comes to responding in RFPs with sample customers, is that the customers and the customer feedback and customer evidence that we were given was not relevant to us, because we are a 100-person software company and we were given IBM as a reference. We do not operate like IBM. We do not have a budget like IBM. We do not have an employee base like IBM. We do not have the problems that IBM has. We are an entirely different beast. And so why are you trying to say, well, IBM, you should be honored that we do business with IBM. Just look at this. This should give you confidence in doing business with us. Nothing, I mean, there's a lot of things that turn buyers off, but one of the ones that turns them off the most is when you give them irrelevant customer stories from companies and people that they can't relate to. Everybody wants to hear how somebody in a role just like theirs, in a company just like theirs, dealt with problems just like theirs. Notice the thing that was in common across those 3 items, just like theirs. So great, if you do business, if your entire customer base and target market is the top 25 brands, then sure, showcase the top 25 brands. But if 3/4 of your business is in the mid-market, who cares what Shell and Mercedes and AT&T and FedEx say, right? Go after the customer stories that are just like the customers that you're going after, that you're looking to win. Relevancy matters. Relevancy is key. And you're going to come across as sound deaf if you're not aligning your customer proof in terms of the demographics and psychographics of those companies with the way the same demographics and psychographics of your prospects who are consuming this information. So I wish I had a dollar for every time somebody told me at Forrester that we can't go after them. They're not a Fortune 100. Oh boy, don't get me going. All right, I'm going to move on to mega myth number 6. And this one tends to usually come from our creative team, or from your creative team, or maybe you have a digital agency or something like this. And this is the sentiment that, yeah, everyone loves our testimonial videos, our professionally produced testimonial videos. And you guys have probably seen the one here that I have a picture of on the right here, Michael H. This is, if anybody knows what this was an ad for on TV, put it into the chat. Okay, so this was a guy. Give you a hint. He was doing a. All right, nobody's going to guess. This was for ZipRecruiter, I think. And so basically, here he is. And this is what a lot of our testimonial videos look like, right? It's somebody in a staged environment. They're professionally produced with the A roll, the B roll, the lower thirds, the bumpers. A lot of them start with the drone video footage coming into their office building, and then there's some cameo shots going down the hallway, looking at people walking around. And you know what? Those are beautiful videos, and people take a lot of pride in those videos, and that they are, that they, really are, beautiful to look at. How do buyers look at these, though, these highly produced testimonial videos? They perceive them to be advertisements. Think about it. They're very scripted. Oftentimes, the customer is looking off to the side, talking like a robot and reading off of a script and just saying whatever you wanted them to say. And then their colleague comes on next and they're looking the other way and talking off to the side. And so buyers perceive these types of videos to be advertisements, commercials, television commercials, because they're so used to seeing things just like them on television. So, so what do you do about this? Well, remember, what buyers really want to hear is the good, the bad, and the ugly, the unpolished views of what your customers have to say. They don't want to have it look like this person has been told exactly what to say, because it doesn't help them. And I'm going to get in later, talk a little bit about what the biggest questions are that buyers ask on reference calls. But never once have I seen a testimonial video address any of the top 10 questions that buyers ask when they're on customer reference calls. Now, where are these professionally produced testimonial videos? What are they good for? Well, so they're certainly good for a lot of things, because what they do is they make a brand impression, right? They make a statement about your brand, that you have this polished, professionally produced brand. And so people that watch them, they get that impression of you. And so where should you use them? Yeah, maybe you do use it on your homepage to make a brand impression, but don't think about it as customer proof or customer testimony. Just think of it as just a brand impression. Another place where it's great to use them is at the opening of sessions at your customer conferences, right? That's where you should be putting the money into these professionally produced videos. But they do not help a buyer move through a buying process or a problem-solving process and earn trust and overcome their questions, fears, and doubts. And then I can also tell you that when you are producing these videos, I work with a lot of my clients who have invested probably $30,000. I know one company in Boston here spends $50,000 on each testimonial video, and what ends up happening is they tend to be 2.5 to 3 minutes long, and you might have done 1 to 2 to sometimes 3 hours of on-site camera crew recording in order to generate that 2.5 to 3 minutes of testimonial video. Well, you know what? All the real valuable stuff that this person said during those interviews hit the cutting room floor. And so even if you are producing these professional videos to make the brand impression, make sure you also say, okay, how can we also take the content from these interviews and turn them into other forms of assets. Remember, capture once, create many, turn it into many other forms of assets that are more aligned with how buyers buy and how it is that you can overcome their questions, fears, and doubts. Okay, so that's myth number 6. Let me go on now to myth number 7. So this oftentimes comes from customer success, because us as customer marketers, we're always hounding customer success or account managers or whoever it is that's closest to the customer to say, hey, what customer do you have that's been with us for 3+ years, is making great use of our solutions, has no support issue, and is not up for renewal? Well, that's hardly ever that you find somebody like that. But usually what they come back and what customer success comes back and says is, when you say, oh, is this customer ready? Can we use this customer? Can we use that customer? Oh, no, sorry, we can't use this customer because they can't go public. All right. So there's this assumption behind this mega myth that it's all or nothing, right? It's either this customer is going to agree to do a full-blown testimonial video or case study that can go public and go on CNN, go on YouTube, go everywhere, or there's no value in working with them. Sorry. Don't bring me anybody who can't go public. And this is an absolute farce, right? This is an absolute mega myth, because there's so much value that you can get from people even if they can't go public. Plus, even more importantly, there are so many ways that you can tell the story that can get around either the PR or legal restrictions that might cause that stakeholder to initially tell you that they can't go public. Because that's the party line. Okay, I've been an executive at lots of big companies, and we always just tell our employees, especially our managers and directors, you cannot go public talking about your experiences with any vendor, right? And so that's just the party line. Yeah, we wouldn't be in business if we didn't have ways of getting around that. And so what I always tell people is, okay, first thing to do if the customer can't go public, it's not an absolute no. One is, okay, maybe if they're in pharmaceuticals or if they're in financial services, yeah, maybe they're in a highly regulated industry and they do actually have legal requirements where they cannot give you testimonials, endorsements, whatever it is. So that's a very reality. I mean, that's a real situation right there. But there's still lots of things you can do, even in those situations, to have more secure distribution of the content that you're capturing. So let's say even in the most highly regulated industry where somebody just can't go on the record because they're in the pharmaceutical industry, you might say to them, hey, you know what? I'd love to capture your story, but we're only going to use it within very targeted, we'll only share it with prospects who are late stage in a buying process with us, and you can give us a blacklist of your competitors who you don't want to see this or whatever. And you know what happens 9 times out of 10 is your champion, who was just covering his or her ass by saying, no, we can't do it because we can't go public. If you give them a way that they can CYA and still participate in a way that helps them showcase their knowledge, experience, and advice, then they'll oftentimes do it, right? And so that's been my experience, both at Forrester and with a whole bunch of clients that I work with. And then there's also ways of doing it where I remember working with one client that had a customer in the pharmaceutical industry, and he basically said, he worked for Merck, and he said, you can't identify me to Merck, but you can use my picture, you can use my name, my title, my location, my industry, and my voice. And that's all fine. And you know what? He covered his ass because he didn't use Merck, but he did have anybody that's that looks at his story, watches those video snippets or whatever, all they have to do is go to LinkedIn and look up his name and they can see he's from Merck. But he got around it because he really wanted to participate, because we did it in a way that helped him showcase his knowledge and experience and advice. And so that's another thing. Now let's say you're going beyond just the highly regulated industries, just to the ones that just might have this corporate policy by default. Now what you do is you go to these champions and say, hey, look, we're not looking for a testimonial, endorsement, or a recommendation, right? Because nobody can give testimonials or endorsements or recommendations. Nobody wants to do it. There's nothing in it for the customer to give you a testimonial or an endorsement or a recommendation. And you know what? Buyers don't even want to see or listen to endorsements, testimonials, or recommendations. Instead, what you want to do is present your customers with opportunities for them to showcase their knowledge, experience, and advice. So that's very different. This is a 180-degree difference between testimonials, endorsements, and recommendations, where you're begging for them, versus presenting customers with opportunities for them to showcase their knowledge, experience, and advice. And everybody wants to share their knowledge because it makes them feel smart. Everybody wants to share their experiences because it makes them feel successful. And everybody wants to share their advice because it makes them feel heard. So there's lots of ways of getting around this. Yes, they can't go public. One is you don't make it about them and shilling for your company. You make it about them bragging about their own personal success within their company. Two, you could have secure distribution of the content you create, and not everything has to go on YouTube or on your public website. It can still be incredibly valuable. And then I'm going to give you an even extreme case of this. And so when I was at Forrester running our program, there was one of our accounts, a major software company north of Seattle, Washington, and they would not acknowledge that big company from Redmond. They would not allow us to acknowledge that they were a client of ours, even though they are probably one of the most prolific storytellers of customer stories that is out there. But they would not allow us to even acknowledge. But you know what? They said, you can capture stories from our champions at big company in Redmond, Washington all day long as you only share them within big company from Redmond, Washington. And so that's what we did. We at Forrester, we captured stories from our power users within that company, knowing that these are never going to see the light of day outside of the campus. And so and it was phenomenally successful, because by arming our champions, our power users, with a way for them to record their story where they were bragging about their successful initiatives that they were doing with Forrester's help, and then encouraging them to share it with all their friends and colleagues and peers across different product teams and different functional areas of big company from Redmond, Washington, we were able to triple the size of our annual recurring revenue with that one vendor in 1 year. And I'm talking going from like 600K to 1.8 million. So, $1.2 million of revenue from just creating these stories that were never going to go public. So I just want to convince people that there's so many other things you can do. It's not a binary decision customer, will you go public or not? All right, just in the interest of time, I'm going to speed ahead a little bit, and I'm going to go to myth number 8. This oftentimes comes from products as well, where customers need to endorse our product and our company. They think that the best customer stories are ones where they're raving about the product, they're raving about the company. Well, yeah, if you can get customers to do that, great, but like what we just talked about on our last myth, oftentimes they're handcuffed. They can't do that. But nevertheless, the real important thing is, now if we look at this from the buyer's perspective, buyers have way more concerns than just about your product and company, where that they want that your current customers can help put to rest some of those concerns. And like a lot of times they're worried about whether their company is ready yet to tackle this type of initiative that they're considering. And so they want to hear from other customers, how did you know your company was ready to take this on? And so this whole thing that like the product teams always say, like I remember so many times when even back in the days when I used to do the written case studies, the product team would see the draft and they would say, this isn't talking enough about the product and the features and functions of the product or the benefits of the product. And I'm like, well, no, because buyers can get that off of our data sheets, right? From the customer stories, they want to hear about the experience. They want to hear what the implementation was like. They want to hear about the lessons learned. And so this myth, again, it kills me, but something you just need to be armed to turn back and say there's way more than just shilling for your product or company that we need to capture in our customer voice, because that's not just what buyers want. And then number 9, I got this. Oh my God, I got this like you wouldn't believe from PR team at a couple of companies I've worked at, where I would even when I was writing case studies, I would write a case study where it talked about a challenge that the customer had, and they came to me, oh my God, Jeff, everything has to be positive. You have to put a positive spin on every story. We can't do a story about any customer that's had any challenges. All right. I mean, we only have to go to the happiest, most successful customers. Well, you know what? That's going to really limit your potential universe of customers that you can tap into. And buyers don't want you to put a positive spin on every story. A positive spin does not give them the crystal ball into what it's like to be a customer. And if everything is a positive spin, they're not going to believe any of it. But if you're vulnerable and you're more honest and open about what this customer's experience has really been like, they're going to believe all of it even more. They're going to trust you even more. They're going to admire you for being vulnerable. And then they're going to believe the positive accolades even more. And so related to this, let me just jump in and ask people here. And I know some of you on this call may have heard me say this before, but I'm just going to ask if anybody has can type in what they think the number one most asked question is on customer reference calls. Can anybody want to guess? What is the most frequently asked question on customer reference calls? I see some good ones. Ray, how was your experience with customer support? Okay, yep, close. Would you buy this again? That's definitely asked a lot. Implementation, yep, warm. Kaylee, you. Yes, Stephanie, you're right. They do ask that. So Kaylee gave away because she's heard me tell this story 100 times. Yeah, so the most frequently asked question on customer reference calls across all technology segments, products, services in the technology industry, all the interviews I've ever done, is always something to the effect of, what challenges or pitfalls have you hit and how did you get through them? Okay, now let me ask honestly, how many people broadcast or include the challenges or pitfalls that their customers hit in their testimonial videos? I mean, if anybody includes them in your 3-minute or 2.5-minute testimonial videos, or even your 3-page PDF case studies, let me know, because I've never seen one that wasn't 100% positive. So, but this is the number one thing that buyers ask when they're on the phone with your customers doing reference calls. What challenges or pitfalls have you hit and how did you get through them? And you know why they ask that? So they ask this because they know that not everything's going to be perfect. They don't want to read a story where everything is perfect because they're not going to believe it. They know that they're going to run into obstacles. They just don't want to be blindsided. They want to anticipate. They want to know what to expect. They want that crystal ball. They just want to be. They just hate to be blindsided. It's a career limiting move when you get blindsided by a bad experience with a vendor when it was your decision to go with them, or your decision. It was your responsibility to manage that implementation or whatever it might be. So they know things are going to go wrong, and so they really want to know, what challenges or pitfalls have you hit? How did you get through them? And why should you not be worried about including this question? Well, the reason is because if you're halfway decent at customer experience and customer service, you're going to have helped them through that. And that's also another reason why buyers ask this question, is because they want to know that the vendor is going to be there when things go bad, because things will always go bad. There will always be tough times. They just want to know that the vendor is going to be there to help them through it. And so what you do, this is the amazing opportunity, is to admit and reveal, yes, that let the customer reveal and them telling their story in the first person that, yeah, they ran into this big obstacle. I proactively ask this question in every customer interview I do for my clients. And then we showcase the answer on their storyboards. And so so that's what they want to know. And here's the great opportunity. You could give this a happy ending, right? Because the story, they had this challenge. Your company was there. You helped them through it. Maybe somebody was working with them on the weekends, and blah blah blah. Now they got through it and they launched successfully. Maybe it was a week late, but it was still very successful. And now people are just going to love that story because you were there to help them. You helped them through it, and that's exactly what your prospects want to hear. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit more about the types of things that buyers ask. And these are the types of things, again, this isn't back to the most frequently asked questions on reference calls, because those of you that posted into the chat earlier, you're absolutely right. Those are all frequently asked questions, not the number one, but they're all up there. This just happens to be a list from my buyer research about what's top of mind on buyers at each stage of their decision or their problem-solving process. And this goes way back before they're even in a buying process, because the buying process doesn't start till stage 3. And so what you have to realize is if you're just producing content for the buying process or for the marketing funnel, you're missing half of the customer experience, right? Because what happens in stage 1, that's when they realize, ouch, I'm in pain. There's a problem here, but they don't know yet whether it's worth solving. And so they're always asking questions, and they want to hear from others, like, why should we change? Why should we change the status quo? Is our company ready? Is our organization ready for this type of change to tackle this problem? Is it a big enough problem for us to tackle? How do we get buy-in from all of our different stakeholders? And what types of approaches are there? Is it something we can solve with technology purchase? Do we solve with consulting? Do we solve by hiring somebody? Do we bring in a consultant? I mean, what are the different options for us? So they're not even in a buying process yet, but these are the types of questions that they have that your company can't answer these, but you know who can answer these? Your customers. So why aren't your customers, in your customer stories, why aren't you addressing these questions? The questions tend to just be, 1 or 2 sentences about the problem, but and then the implementation, the solution was your solution, your product or solution, right? And how they implemented it, and then the results. But talk about the change management aspects. Have them talk about that. Okay, so then they get into stage 2, where they've maybe made the decision, yeah, we are going to tackle this, but we don't know, we're not evaluating any vendors or suppliers yet. And so they want to know who's had a similar problem or a similar goal that we have, and what have they done about it? And specifically, what have companies just like ours done about it? What outcomes have others achieved by addressing this problem? Is it because they're trying to decide, is it worth it? And what approaches should we consider? A company like us, maybe we can't afford to bring in McKinsey, but do we bring in an independent contractor that could help us solve this problem? And then they get into stage 3, which is where they're starting a buying process now, where they're wondering which vendors have a viable solution for us, how well does each meet our criteria. Then there's all the different things about the what are the experiences of their customers in doing this. And then you have all the objections, right? All the yeah buts, that buyers are going to, they're going to hear things like, oh, your solution is too slow, too expensive, too proprietary, too cumbersome, it's not user friendly, whatever. And so this is another area where you need to get customers doing it. And then when I talk about buyers, I also talk about, it could be existing customers that are in buying mode because they're trying to decide whether to buy more from you or to renew with you. And so even in stage 4, they want to know, okay, what obstacles will we encounter, right, as we move forward with you? How do we get people to use it? What are tricks for adoption that others have used? And so they're wanting to know a lot of these insights from their peers that are going to help them succeed, onboard, adopt rapidly, and give them all the ammunition they need so that you can be more confident that they will renew. Okay, so I'm going to just pause there. I know I had planned to show a few other things, but I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about the the customer marketing myths. I'm going to save that for another webinar. But let me just open it up to you and then put that challenge out to anybody. And feel free at this point if you want to come off your mute if you want to speak, or if you want to just chat or raise your hand in the chat. But I'd love to hear from people. Again, don't shoot the messenger, but if you need more convincing on anything that I've said, more data, or if you need some ammunition to help you convince others that maybe it's silly to keep doing all this stuff if buyers don't really want it, feel free to reach out to me. We could do a half-hour inquiry session. That's the thing I miss the most about being a Forrester analyst, is doing inquiry sessions. But so I love to do them and can arm you with specific data points to help you make the case. But first of all, before we even get to that point, I would love to hear if there's anybody who has even contradictory data. Like maybe, for example, you've done the buyer research that tells you that you've heard from the mouths of your buyers that they love your written third-person case studies, right? In which case, I highly encourage you to keep doing more of them, because that's the key takeaway here, is use the data to make the decision. Don't just use the fact that sales keeps asking for it, executives misunderstand it, customer success pushes back on it, or product marketing wants more of it, right? I mean, you let the data decide. He or she who has the data about what buyers really want really is in the driver's seat, and it's hard to argue with you. It's easy to debate opinions. It's hard to debate with the data. Yeah, so Krista asked, where can we find this buyer data? Yeah, that's what, like I would need to know. I can pull it out for you. I've got sloths and libraries and repositories full of kind of assimilated buyer interview data, and so if you're interested, just reach out to me at jeff@slot5.com. Let me know like what role like your buyer is, what functional role are they, and what are they buying when they do business with you, and I can probably pull all kinds of data on, for example, like what is it that triggers the need in the first place for them to want to pursue a solution like yours. We dig into things like what are the desired benefits that they're hoping to get as they go down this path, the kind of the aspirations that they have. We could talk about what are the barriers and perceptions that get in the way. We uncover that in our buyer research. And then we also uncover things like, what are the step-by-step process that they go through? And you might say it's all over the place, and buyer journey maps tend to look like spaghetti, but for the most part, there tends to be things people do early on, things they do middle, things they do later on, and things they do as they're about to pull the trigger. And I've got data on all those types of things. So, yeah, and so anybody have any questions, or anybody want to throw a situation at me right now where I can give it, or even better, did I miss any of, I only wanted to focus on my top 10, but did I miss another myth that you feel like you're dealing with at your company? Maybe it's a perception that people have of this is the only way to do things, where you're kind of suspecting that there might be a better way.
I've heard all these things, Jeff, all these things, both ways. What do you have any suggestions on what would be, for example, what would replace a case study? Or would it just be that you would write it totally differently?
Well, there's lots of things that could replace it. Well, and first of all, I mean, in this day and age, video is king, right? And so everybody loves video, but nobody, like I said, they don't want the testimonial videos. And so what I highly recommend is a format that is, kind of prompt response pairs, basically, where it's we like what we call it at Slot 5 is a recorded reference call. where you're not just creating the 3-minute brand video or a 30-minute recording of a call, but instead it's like 1 to 2 minute snippets where customers are answering questions like, why did you decide it was time to replace your old ERP system? What was the process like from going from one? How did you get buy-in from all your team, right? And then have customers, responding either in audio or video in their own voice, answering each question. And you know why that format is so powerful? And maybe I should actually just I could switch over and show you an example of it. But why it's so powerful is because buyers like to skim, right? And wherever a buyer is in their buying process, they're at different points as they go through a multi-month buying process, and they've got different questions, fears, and doubts at each stage. And so when they're going through any piece of customer content, consuming it, they're going to skim it, and really they want to be able to zoom in to what their the section that addresses the concern that's top of mind for them right in that moment, right? They don't want to have to read a whole 4-page PDF case study. And so again, video snippets aligned with how buyers buy, organized and presented, within those top 20 questions that your prospects ask anyway, or the things that have to overcome their question, fear, or doubt. And again, Ray, I'm happy to, if you wanted to do an inquiry session, this is something I do with all my clients anyway, which is, just help them understand what it is that the buyers in general in their market, like what are those biggest questions, fears, and doubts that they have? Because if you haven't done that analysis and you're just writing case studies, you're writing them blind, right? Because every piece of customer content you create should be attacking, should be crushing or knocking down known and very common questions, fears, or doubts that buyers have as they go through a buying process. Otherwise, how do you know if you're missing the mark? Oh, maybe I'll just show this one. Let me know if this screen's. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Can you still see my screen? Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah, but it's your opening slide or your end slide.
Okay, because this is maybe this is something. I'm just going to do a different share here, and I will just share my screen, my desktop. Okay, let me know if you can see this. And can you guys now see my screen here with Axway? Okay.
Yes.
So here's an example of a better way than just a written challenge solution result case study. This is the example I described earlier when I was talking about the company that sells with the pharmaceutical client who works at Merck, right? So this is showing you a couple of examples. This is a semi-anonymous case study, but just a tiny bit anonymous, right? The only thing that we're not revealing is that this guy works at Merck, but this is Scott Kennedy. He loves sharing his voice. He was able to, get around the handcuffs that his company puts on him by not using the Merck logo here. But notice here now, in this particular layout for this particular piece of content asset, we were asking him things like, what triggered the need for a new content collaboration solution? So remember, he's not shilling for the vendor by answering this question. He's talking about something that he encountered before he even knew what vendors he was going to evaluate. I mean, that's what your buyers want to know. Like, okay, what tools were you using before and why did you decide to replace them? Okay, so now we're digging into the pain of how they were trying to do things before. And then we're asking him, what criteria did you use when evaluating and comparing content collaboration solutions? So now he's giving advice to his peers, right? So this is knowledge, this is experience, this is advice. And behind each one of these, in this particular case, is just, is an audio snippet with his face of him answering this question, right? And so now it's very credible. It just so happens that this gentleman didn't want to be on video, and audio is 99.9%. And that's in my opinion. I don't have data to support that, but in my opinion, it's 99% as effective as video. Audio is. You're just not seeing his lips move, but you're still hearing his tone of voice. You're still hearing the emotion. You're still, and there's so much that gets lost in the written word that gets picked up when you hear the tone of voice of somebody describing something. And so So this is just an example of, you know, we call this one like a recorded reference or a case study 2.0 or something like that. So hopefully that helps to see something like that. And then
Thank you.
maybe I think if there's just one more, like, let me just show you one of my favorites is, you know, this one right here. This is just a different format, but it's still a single customer that is, you know, Acumatica, the cloud ERP vendor. This is their customer, and this is part of my advice too. Is, you know, for one of my points about my myths is that the stories should always need to be about your product or your company. No. The stories, the customer should be the star, the featured star of the story, right? It should be all about the customer, and you know, there's plenty of ways to wrap your products around what the customer did. But notice in this case, we're asking Charles, you know, because he replaced his old ERP system, which was Microsoft Dynamics here. But, you know, we're asking him things like, why did you decide it was time to move off your old ERP system? This is the $1 million question in the ERP space, because it's a multi-year project to replace your ERP system. Nobody's going to do it unless they're in absolute world of hurt. And so this is why this question gets answered right up front. In this case, it's a video snippet of Charles, you know, answering that question, you know, talking about why he couldn't live another day with his old solution. In this particular one, you know, it skims across. Buyers can just go across and skim. Okay, there's something about their licensing model. Well, I'm interested in that. Maybe I don't really care about support right now. I do care about, though, why they went with cloud, because I'm considering both cloud and on-prem. So notice that it's much more aligned with how buyers like to consume information. It's much more surgical and presenting information the way they need it, just giving them just enough. Okay. And I think we're at the top of the hour. And now I also see that looks like, I think Dana was telling you about our next session is next Tuesday at 2 p.m., led by Dana on revenue influenced customer programs. So really kind of challenging conventional thinking about how it is you can design programs that influence revenue, but also ways that you can measure that, because you want to design the programs in ways that then can be measured. And because I think we all know that the holy grail of customer marketing is to be able to put numbers to the amount of revenue or percentage of revenue that we've influenced, whether that's new customer revenue, renewal revenue, services revenue, recurring revenue. So, all right. Let me just see. Okay, so maybe I'll just answer one question. I'm just trying to see if there's questions here. I see Krista has asked, I can see how this would be good for sales and specific customers. I'm curious how well this format incorporates into marketing channels. Well, if your marketing channels include things like let's say the marketing channels include like lead nurturing campaigns through marketing automation, well, it works great here, because here's an example also with Acumatica where they have a campaign landing page, which now features 4 customers who have replaced a competitor, each of them talking about why they decided it was time to move off their old ERP system. So this goes through the marketing, direct marketing channel that they use for lead nurturing, drip marketing basically, as well as by the sales SDRs use this for prospecting into accounts. It also works great in social channels. And so like a lot of this format is really powerful in social. I'll give you an example here. Also sticking with Acumatica just for kicks here, but they in their blogs, they also include, you know, audio and video, you know, decomposed here, atomized content from their customers, which is the most consumed content on their blogs. And this could very easily be used for social campaigns as well. And then it's super powerful for supporting channel partners for indirect sales. You know, because they always want to be armed with co-branded ammunition that they can use for, like, if you have value-added resellers, reach out to me, jeff@sop5.com, if you want to either challenge me in private about some of my data says, if you want to see what this data says about your market, or if you just need some ammunition to help, if you totally believe this, but you just want to make the case within your company. Always glad to talk about this.